as Shelly said, I've been in marketing actually it's a little over 20 years, not quite 25. That's all right. And just a couple housekeeping things before we get started. I try to put handouts on everybody's table. I mean, as you can see in this format, we are low tech. So you're not going to be distracted by a big PowerPoint behind my head, which means you get to focus on me and what we're going to talk about. But this will give you that opportunity to write down some notes and some of the main points that we talk about today. To give you a little bit more about my background, I actually, my undergrad degree is actually in graphic design. And I had been in marketing both for small agencies and also big corporate. I was at a Fortune 500 company for 12 and a half years. And took the chance to leave that environment. Yes. And then started my own company called Spa for the Spirit and had that for 7 years. All the while being my own chief marketing officer and developing marketing materials and really learning what it's like to be both a business owner and understanding that small business marketing efforts that you have to do. So I understand what it's like to have many, many things, to have to juggle, to have your attention pulled in hundreds of different directions at once, and how challenging it is to really be able to focus and to really get traction with some of your marketing. So I'm here today to share with you a lot of the mistakes that I've seen small business owners make, some of the mistakes I've made in the past that I don't want you to repeat. And so we're just going to kind of jump in, and at the end there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions, so you can kind of pick my brain, and I know there's probably a lot of wisdom in the room as well. So, all right, so, and these aren't in any particular order, but I've just kind of put them in some sequence that seem to kind of make sense. So the first biggest marketing mistake is having an unclear positioning. Now, what do I mean by that? And you may hear the term positioning. What does that really mean? That means that if you were to stand up here and you were to line up all next to your competitors, okay, and you were all standing right next to each other, what's going to distinguish you and your business from the guy standing next to you? What do you do better, faster, cheaper, add more value, whatever it is? What is it that's going to distinguish you? And taking time to really figuring that out is really key to helping establish your position, because your position is going to inform every other thing that you do as far as marketing your business. So really taking the time to understand that. It's important to have a compelling differentiating factor. Is it how you deliver the customer service? Is it what you say every time you walk into that store? I mean, if you walk into Gates, what do you hear?
Hi, may I help you?
Louder?
Hi, may I help you?
That's what you hear. Hi, may I help you? Right? And you remember them for that. Now, granted, there's lots of barbecue places in town. They all have blue ribbon winners. They all have their secret sauce. They all have their secret ingredients. But you remember Gates for the hi, I may help you. Not to mention the fact they have really good barbecue as well. So they deliver on that position and they want to be helpful. What I see a lot of small businesses make is that they don't take time to define that positioning, and they really want to try to be everything to everyone. They're afraid to say, you want to be needed and you want to be liked by everyone and you want to have everyone like your product or service. But you're also, a lot of small business owners are afraid to say no to this particular kind of business so that they can say yes to this other type of business. So it's just as important to ask yourself the kind of clients that you're not going to have or the type of business you're not going to do as it is the type of business that you are. Let me give you some other examples of some really, I think, compelling positioning. Has anyone ever heard of Sheer Madness? It's a salon that cuts hair, right? And there's a lot of salons around town that will cut hair. But their particular positioning is specifically tailored towards kids. So it's not adults, it's not a barbershop, it's not a high-end fancy salon, it's specifically tailored for kids. So if you're a kid and you walk in there, it's really an experience. And you just don't sit in the barber chair, you get to sit in the little toy car that hoists you up in front of the mirror. And there's a little TV screen in front of you. So your head is still, the whole watching the video that's going on, and so it makes it easier for the haircut people. I mean, it's like a whole experience, and that's the position in the niche that they determine of what they're going to do. Another example, has anyone ever been to the mall and seen historic justice? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, probably two. And there's a specific reason for that, because they have defined their position in the marketplace, and you two are their target. And if you're not familiar with Justice, they're a clothing store, but they just don't sell clothing to anyone. They don't sell it to adults. They don't sell it for babies and toddlers. They don't even sell it to men. They don't even sell it to teens. Their target is the tweens, meaning girls ages 8 to 12. Okay? That's a pretty narrow niche. That's a pretty, very defined target market. And they've put their stake in the sand that that's who they're going to go for. And they do it very, very well. You walk into that store, it's everything pink and glittery that you can possibly imagine. And I guarantee you walk into that store and you are not going to see a dad or brother unless they're dragged in there by their mom or their sister. And they also understand their target market because of their pricing strategy, and that's something really interesting with them. They regularly have this 40% off on all their prices. Well, as a woman, as a shopper, when I see 40% off, do you know what I think? That's almost half. I can get a lot of things for almost half off. And so you start to justify in your mind, things that you can get for your tween. So they've defined their positioning in the marketplace, and they really stick by it. Excuse me. The second biggest marketing mistake is an unclear target market. Okay? And that kind of goes along with the positioning, but many times I see businesses not do enough research on who it is that's buying their product or service, or who it is that needs their product or service. So many times they want to be everything to everyone, and they just don't take the time, and they come up with a product or service and they think it's a great idea, and in their mind, well, of course there's a need for it because I have a need for that. And I have to say, as a business owner, I made this marketing mistake the first time out when I had my first business. It was called Spa for the Spirit, and it was all about, we started doing retreats and day spas, and then evolved it to doing speaking and teaching on wellness programs, and then offering spa services for organizations and conference rooms and groups and the such. I thought, because I'm stressed, everyone's stressed. Because I want this, everyone should want this. Because I need this, everyone needs this. No, not the case. There was a lot of competition out there. I didn't do enough research on how people really relieve their stress. I didn't realize that my competitors were not only the other spas, which were the obvious competitors, but the unobvious competitors of other ways that people relieve their stress. Going out with friends, having a beer on Friday afternoon, going shopping, hanging out in front of the TV. There was a lot of ways people relieve their stress, and they didn't necessarily want to have, I had to do a lot of educating to try to convince people that no, my solution was better than what you're doing now. So understanding who your target market is and really looking at that target market from their perspective, not yours. I cannot emphasize that enough. Imagine yourself that you're buying that product or service, and what would you want, say, or do? Asking your target market. When was the last time you asked your current customers about your products or services? Continually checking in with your target market to ensure that your products and services are relevant and that you're targeting a need. And what you realize with that is that you learn those emotional triggers of why people buy. They may really like your product or service. They may really think it's a great idea. But are they going to pull their wallet out of their pocket and give it to you to buy your product or service? The number 3 biggest mistake I see is no formal written marketing plan. Or any written marketing plan. It's all up here, baby. Right? How many of you have a written marketing plan? Okay? You ever heard the quote? Failure to plan is a plan to fail. And just by the act of writing it down, you are going to be more effective than what you are now. I guarantee you. And that's a proven fact among any kind of goal setting among high income earners. If you write it down, even if you write it on a Post-it note and put it on your computer screen, at least you're one step farther than where you're at now. A lot of times, small business owners, well, I'll get to it, when I have free time. How many of you have lots of free time? Right? Probably not very many. And because they don't write it down, they don't take the time to analyze what's really working, what's really not. And what happens is that you, as a business owner, get bombarded by the Business Journal, you get bombarded by a variety of magazines, by the billboard company, by these promotional companies, by these companies that'll do pay-per-click ads, that'll update your website, you get bombarded by all of these different sources, and each one thinks that they are the perfect solution to your problem. But because you haven't stepped back and developed a formal marketing plan, you don't know what's going to work for you and what's not. So if you have that plan, you can say, you know what, that may be a great idea for a different kind of business, but I know that's not going to work for me. And so by formalizing that and writing that down, it gives you that litmus test, and also gives you that confidence that what you're doing is really going to make the best traction to get where you want to go as far as your sales and your business. And with that, excuse me, a lot of companies don't know what not to do. I think it's a really important question to ask, whether it's for yourself and your personal goals, or whether it's for your business, or whether it's for your family life, whatever it is. What is it this year in 2011 that I'm going to stop doing? You may know what you're going to do, but what are you going to stop doing? That's just as important of a question, because it forces you to realize what you have been doing that doesn't work. And that's when you have limited budget and limited resources and limited time, those are really key questions to ask. Now, part of the marketing plan process is to understand the newest media that's in the mix for how you can market your business, and that's social media. Who's heard of social media? Right? How many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, how many of you are on Facebook? And how many of you are on Twitter? Okay, so that's interesting. If you guys looked around the room, this is probably more of a B2B audience. We've got a lot of business people on LinkedIn, maybe just a little bit less on Facebook, and even fewer on Twitter. Now, I went and looked up the recent stats. Facebook's not at 500 million worldwide. Oh, no. It's 643 million users worldwide. It's 152 million U.S. population is on Facebook right now. And that's pretty powerful. And that actually equates to about 55% of the entire population. I know, think about that. And I'm like, okay, no, wait a minute. Facebook started in July of 2008. So we're not even 3 years in to Facebook, and it's already integrated into over half of the U.S. population. So what that says to me, social media is not going away. And if you haven't figured out how to embrace social media, you're going to need to, because if you're not, you can bet your competition is. And there's a lot of people out there that claim to be experts, and I would say only 2.5, almost 3 years out. I kind of think of it in the context of aviation. Kitty Hawk flew in I think it was 1902, 1903, and within 30 years they finally got to the cross-Atlantic flight. So I kind of feel like we're kind of there with the Facebook, but no one is a jet fighter pilot yet in a big plane. Okay, no one has gone to the moon yet as far as the social media. So there's a lot of people still figuring it out, still understanding what it all means and how you really leverage it. But there are some things that I can share with you on some really powerful ways you can leverage it today and figure it out for your target market. Now, if you're in a B2C business, okay, business to consumer, how many of you are kind of in that space? Facebook is definitely a place where you want to be. There are more casual conversations, friend-to-friend conversations are going on. If you didn't know, you can create a company page on Facebook, and you can also create shopping carts on Facebook. So you can do all your shopping all within that particular medium, believe it or not. Yeah, it's amazing. Now, I went to the orthodontist. I took my daughter to the orthodontist 2 weeks ago. Okay, he's a B2C business. Guess what his target market is? Tweens and teens, ages 10 to 20 years old. That's the biggest population right now that's on Facebook. And here's how he's using Facebook to leverage his business. If you take a picture of yourself, if you're smiling with the braces, and you're in green, and you upload it with your parents' permission to their company page, the picture with the most likes on March 17th gets a free iPad. Right, so who wouldn't want a free iPad? What teenager is not telling all of their friends, families, cousins, whatever, to go to this page and click on like? So it's the social media in that case is taking the power and the technology of word of mouth and exponentially growing it. So it's not just, you just don't have to run into somebody at the grocery store to get let me hear about your great experience. The technology is enabling that very quickly and very broadly. So I was like, oh, that's a great idea. If you're in a B2B business, who's in a B2B business? Okay. LinkedIn is probably a better space for you to spend more time in. Now that doesn't mean you necessarily need to ignore Facebook, but you have to look at really what social media is best for you. And I've got several stories on the power of LinkedIn. One in particular is I had a friend of mine who saw a post from somebody that she knew that I did not, that said, having trouble with my logo, not quite sure it's the right thing for our green cleaning products. Right, so she saw it, needs some help. So she saw that post and forwarded it to me on LinkedIn, and I was like, ooh, that's perfect for me. That's exactly my target market. And I said, Teresa, do you know him? Because you have to gauge LinkedIn, and you have to understand how you're going to leverage LinkedIn. Are you going to connect with people that you just meet for 10 minutes, or are you going to connect with people that you really can have a conversation with? I tend to be in this kind of camp, you can really have a conversation with, that I feel quality connections there. And so I called Teresa and I said, do you know him? She's like, well, I don't really know him that well. And I said, well, that's okay. I'll email him and tell him that you shared his post with me and see if he wants to talk. In the meanwhile, and this is where I use LinkedIn not only for marketing but almost as a sales development tool, I saw who else he was connected to that I knew. So one, he was connected to one of my other clients, so I called up Cheryl and I said, Cheryl, can you send an email to Bob and tell him about your experience about me? And then I saw he was connected to Greg, and I emailed Greg. I said, Greg, can you send some sort of email to Bob and talk about your experience with me? And so lo and behold, a week later, he finally calls me. Yes. And we talked, and we saw if there was a good fit, and we had set up a meeting. By the time I walked in the meeting, he's like, you know what, I got another recommendation about you. You have really highly recommended. And I'm like, yes. So, I mean, that's to the power of LinkedIn and how that can make those connections happen. And that was a really easy sell. I didn't have to convince him because I already came pre-qualified. So that's something, LinkedIn is really powerful that way. You can see if you're trying to reach Joe Attorney at a law firm, and I know David happens to know Joe, I'm going to call David and say, can you send an email? Or maybe I'll send an email to David and say, can you introduce me? Or how can I get connected with him? As well as I know some construction companies that are trying to expand out into other regions of the country. Well, they're able to go out and search on LinkedIn and see who's a construction contractor in those areas that they can hire that will execute some of their building projects that they're working on. So, and there's groups out there, and you can do job postings out there. There's a million things you can do out on LinkedIn. And honestly, I was telling Shelly earlier, just to talk about social media in of itself is probably a 2 or 3 session workshop. So, but those are just a couple examples kind of right off the top. The fourth biggest mistake that I see companies make is lack of focus. Lack of focus. They have a million things coming at them at once, and I understand that. But that disciplined process of creating that marketing plan is going to help you focus and determine what's going to be your best option to move the ball forward fastest. You can create that wonderful position. You may have done your research. You may have decided those one or two things that's going to distinguish you from your competitors. But for some reason, and I cannot figure out why, when business owners go out into the marketplace and start telling people about what it is they do, they feel like they need to say it differently every time. And I don't know why that is. Well, if I said it this way to this group, I need to say it a little bit differently over to this group. Well, the reality is we get 5,000 to 8,000 advertising messages a day. Okay? A day. Now, I took 24 hours minus 8 hours for sleep, assuming we all get 8 hours of sleep, right? And that equates to 312 messages per waking hour, or 5.3 messages per minute. So hopefully if you're using the restroom, you maybe not have those in the restroom, although there are some places where you do get those. But you probably get more when you go back to your computer or turn on the TV. So it's really, really important that you repeat. Once you decide what your message is and how that is going to speak to that emotional trigger to buy, you want to repeat. And if you're still not sure what to do, you want to repeat. And I cannot emphasize that enough. It's going to be consistency and hitting that same message over and over and over again. And if it feels like to you that you're beating a dead horse, then you're starting to get close. Okay? You want that feeling of being sick and tired of saying the same thing over and over again, because to your customer, it may be the first time that they've heard it, or it may be the first time that it's finally sinking in to understand what it is that you really do. Okay? The other thing about focus, I think, relates to budget. There are some people that will take their marketing dollars and try to put them in 6 or 7 different buckets. So you may have some advertising over here, you may have a radio ad over here, you may have a sponsorship over here, you got suckered into sponsoring a kid's baseball team, you may have a pay-per-click campaign going on here. And what that essentially accounts to is you're spending your dollars and you're getting a broad spectrum, but it's not very focused and it's not very effective. Because if you've really defined your target market, are they really living in all of those spaces? Okay? So you're much better off to go back and analyze what is the one venue that's really going to move the ball the farthest. I mean, if you imagine, if you're trying to walk down 4 paths at the same time, how far would you get? If you chose one path and took all that energy on that one path, you would get much farther down the road. So it's all about creating a laser. And if my cat was here, he'd be chasing us around. I don't know if you can see that. There's the laser. Okay? Very concentrated, very narrow, but very, very effective. Enough to where it can cut steel. The number 5 biggest marketing mistake is no measurements. There's an adage that says, if you're not measuring, you're not marketing. If you're not measuring, you're not marketing. And if you're not measuring, how do people hear about us, or how many hits you have on your website, or how many leads came in the door, you might as well just clear that toilet flush and see your dollars spinning down the toilet. Because that's essentially what's happening. You may be having fun doing it, it may be exciting, it may be, wow, this is going to make the difference. And you may be really excited about it. Maybe a great campaign, or maybe, you feel like you really spent your dollars really, really well. And you're really excited on that front end. But if you're not measuring the impact of how it brings people through the door, then you're not really marketing. And so business owners either don't measure or they very inconsistently measure. I hear stories all the time. Well, my secretary answers the phone, or my assistant answers the phone, and she just doesn't really like asking me questions. It makes her feel uncomfortable. And I shake my head, because you've got to make that a disciplined business activity as much as opening your email, or doing the invoices, or doing payroll. You've got to be asking, how did you hear about us? If you want your business to grow, when you start measuring that, it will have a huge impact. So many business owners, are either they don't do it or they do it very inconsistently. Maybe they measure the web and the email, but they don't measure the phone and the trade shows. Maybe they measure how many leads come into the trade shows, but they don't really know how many of those translated into an actual sale. And that's really, really important. Maybe they only track for a certain period of time. Oh yeah, we got to start doing that. We start doing it for a couple weeks, and then it kind of falls off the radar, and then you kind of forget about it. You don't ask your staff about it at the staff meeting a month from now. And so, he's not asking about it, so it must not be important. So if you always ask your staff, or always put that into their reviews, then it's going to start to get measured. And I will say, with the web and email, who does email marketing? Right? There are, on most systems today, there are reports that show you what the ones that you send, what your bounce rate is, what your open rate, so somebody actually opened your email and maybe at least read the subject line and the top sentence. But then there's also the click-through rate. How many click through to that white paper on your website? How many people click through to find out more information or get something free so that you can track that on your website? Again, with your website, who has Google Analytics on their website? Okay? If you don't have some sort of tracking mechanism, or at the very least Google Analytics on your website, you need to write that down as a to-do item. Okay? You need to go back and send the email to your web developer. Do we have tracking on our website to know how many individual visits we get and where people are spending their time as far as content? And if oh yeah, we have those reports, well, we need to be seeing those every month. And there needs to be a system for that to happen. And Google Analytics is a free tracking system, so it's very easy to implement and add to your website. Your web developer should know how to do it. If they don't know how to do it, then that's a red flag that you maybe need a new web developer. But if they're not offering that to you and saying and generating those reports, then you need to make sure that that's a to-do item, because that's really important. Okay, so let me just recap real quickly. We've got unclear positioning. We have an unclear target market. We have no written marketing plan. Lack of focus. And the last one is no measurements. So the marketing coach in me would ask you to look over those 5 areas and see which one of those you need to work on the most. And I want you to circle or star it on your sheet. And then if you really want to take it a step further, you're going to write down one item that you're going to do within the next 24 hours to make an impact on that area. Okay? Decide what you're going to do.